Hey there, Variety here. Welcome to today's video in which we're going to be doing an arch guide for Fantasy Tales, Sword and Magic. There is a lot to unpack in this video, so let's jump into it quite quickly. Okay, so let's have a look at the skills. Today I'm just going to focus on the skills that I'm using and not really go too much into skills that I'm not going to be using, but I will mention them. Divine Volley, AoE ability, and it's targetable. Any archer in any game's ever used this. Multi-shot, shoots 3 arrows straight forward. Again, any archer in any game has had this. It's not really useful for this build because the shooter build is focused on long range, so we want to stay away as far as possible. So shooting a short range multi-shot, kind of pointless. Spirit Wing is a stun, not really helpful. Chain Shot is going to be 2-shot single target damage. This is going to be core of our build. Piercing Shot is a secondary AoE ability. You're going to use this along with Divine Volley to do your AoE damage. Even though this build is more focused on single target, you're going to want to have some AoE. Wind's Blessing is a buff, and you're going to use it quite regularly. It's going to buff your damage, and it's going to give you a shield, which is always nice on a class that can't heal yourself. Your last ability will be your talent ability, which will be here. So it's always into this slot here and you can't move it. But for the talent ability in the shooter class, it's called No Escape. Basically what it does is it shoots a couple of bullets and it does quite a bit of damage. For shooter, every time you're auto-attacking, it actually reduces the cooldown on this by a second. So every time you weave in auto-attacks, it reduces your cooldown of this ability. So weaving in auto-attacks is very important. So let's have a look at the talents real quick. Windsong. This makes it so your blessing, your buff that I was talking about, is even stronger. And using it in No Escape will increase the crit rate and hit rate and stacks up, so that's really good. So basically you want to be using your buff ability and your shooter ability, which is No Escape, as much as you can. Penetrator. This is what I mentioned before, where you want to be far away because you do more damage from long range. Physical Mastery, all these things here are just basically extra stats. Arrow Range, Arrow Rain actually boosts your Divine Volley, which is going to be your main AoE ability. This is why I put quite a few points into it, even if it wasn't necessarily aimed at an AoE ability. String of Pearls, so normal attacks deal extra damage, and the cooldown is reduced by 1 second of No Escape. So this is why you want to level this up. You want to be able to do more damage with your auto attacks because you're weaving them in between to get shooter. That may sound a little bit confusing, but I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so here we have the AoE ability. So basically, you'll be opening all fights up like that or waiting for the mobs to come out and be using that. Here is your other AoE ability. As you see, it's kind of but it's still some AoE. Okay, so now let's use our double shot. Pretty basic, pretty straightforward, right? Okay, so now we're going to use our buff. So now we're buffed up. As you can see, it's going to take a while for the buff to be able to get used again. Okay, so this is pretty much the rotation that I personally use. I'm going to wait for my buff to come back up. Okay, buff, single target, and then use AoE when I need to. Single targets back up. Weave my auto attacks in. Main ability. Single target. And then back to the buff. Up here, I also have my pet abilities, which I can use. The first one's AoE. The second one's single target. So that is the basics for using this. You can also turn on auto combat to a point. You can go into settings and go down to combat settings, and you can adjust what abilities it uses in what order. And, kind of get it to work relatively well. In here I have, buff, single target, AoE, No Escape, opener, then, because usually the mobs come out in the boss by then your main ability, then your pierce shot, then your shield. Although I don't have the shield activated, you can turn it on and off. So that's pretty much how I run this build. The secondary build is something that I've tried, but it's definitely not something I've used as much because I don't think that it really fits. You know how some games will give you an archer and they'll kind of give you a proper archer, like, you know, with arrows and long range, and the other one's kind of like a short range trapper or survivalist that kind of goes up and uses traps or gets kind of up in your face. It's kind of what the secondary build is. So let's open up skills real quick and change over to Reflex. So let's have a look at the talents real quick. So Reflex, basically what it does is it dashes, and when it dashes, it hits targets with arrows, and then it gives you a shield. Here, it makes it so your buff ability, its cooldown is actually less, and it makes it so you move faster. That's why I have this buffed out, because I like the buff ability. Here, your normal attack and your chain shots, which is your ability here, chain shot, the double arrow single target, which is why you want to put points in here. Chaser, extra damage to enemies within 7 meters. This is what I meant by being really close to the enemy. You want to be within 7 meters to get the extra damage. Stalker, Phantom is increased by 24%. Each target hits reduces the cooldown by 1 time up to 3 seconds. This is the Reflex. This is the ability it's talking about. Unused arrow also turns the shield within 10 seconds. The tracker fires 4 consecutive shots. For the next 5 seconds, it will not fire again. Okay, so what we're going to do is have a look at the skills real quick. So Divine Volley, it's always good. That's why I always use it. Multi-shot, we're using it now because we're short range. Chain shot, single target ability as we spoke about earlier. And we are using Wind's Blessing. Okay, so for this build, I'm going to... See, I don't use this one quite as much, but I'm going to buff up my opener. There's my kind of like my range ability. And then I'm going to be weaving that in between. As you can see that the dash ability, it feels like it comes off cooldown like every couple of seconds. So you're basically moving around really close to the enemy. And you have low cooldown abilities. Honestly, this is much more... the cooldowns are so low, I'd call it almost annoying to play. And if you're playing an autoplay, I don't imagine this would go very well. Yeah, if you're auto playing, like many people, they either autoplay fully or they partial autoplay, kind of like I do with my high ping. So what I do is I chain my abilities together and I turn autoplay on and off in the battle, and I control most of the abilities. But I let autoplay use my abilities in order so I can use them quickly. So kind of like this. If I change my talents back, skills, back to shooter. So if I was using auto, I'd let it use the abilities, and then I would move to turn auto off. Then I would use what ability I want, and then I'd hit auto again real quick, turn it back on. Keep in mind, let's say you turn auto on, and let's say you move, right? It takes a moment, but eventually your auto will turn back on. But if you want to turn it on quicker, so let's say you're auto attacking and you move, it'll turn off. You click this on and off real quick, and it will turn it back on quickly. That way you don't have to wait like a whole second and a half before the game registers. I understand that many people will be using auto because they'll be on the mobile. And especially if you're actually on the mobile, I would definitely recommend this build. Because as you see, it's just infinitely easier to use. And it can be semi-auto. You can fully auto if you really want and lower tier content. But, you know, even in slightly higher tier content, you can semi-auto. Where you control the movement and you bring, you know, some extra healing. So keep in mind that you're going to want to use your pet abilities throughout your abilities, and I'm not sure if they're affected by your buffs. So your buff here gives you an extra 10% damage. Not entirely sure if it affects your pets, but you should definitely use your pets early on, especially if you're in challenge modes. Most challenges last about 45 seconds to a minute. So if you blast your pets early on, the cooldowns will come back off before the end of the battle, so you can pump out that damage to finish off the challenges. Okay, I realized a lot of that was kind of fast, and I had to because, you know, there was so much to talk about. But I hope that gives you an idea of the 2 different ways that you can play the class. And I cannot recommend any more that you should use the first build, which is called the shooter build. I definitely would not recommend using the reflex build, simply because even if later it's higher damage, just for most people it would be annoying on the mobile. I feel like it would be impossible to play. But anyway, that's everything for today's video. I hope this helps you decide if this is the class that you want to play. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.